I promise you, I'm not trying to do ASMR. I actually hate ASMR with a bloody passion. So if you hate ASMR, this is your warning. I'm doing it this way because someone is still sleeping upstairs, but I need to do a video because I was supposed to do a video yesterday and I never did. So today I get to do 2 of them. Last year I did a video called Alone on Christmas because I was going to be alone on Christmas for the 2nd year in a row, and I know that a lot of other people deal with that as well. This year I'm actually going to be with family again, but I think that another thing that people experience is being single on Christmas. I mean, obviously people experience that. I'm just saying that I think that it's depressing for a lot of people, and it used to be depressing for myself. If I'm not being clear, I'm also going to be single on Christmas, but it doesn't bother me like at all, but it used to, and that's why I want to talk about that. Adding to the mix, by the way, I'm the walking cliche that the internet likes to make fun of. In fact, another YouTuber, a much bigger YouTuber than myself, someone that I used to watch and admire, called me a spinster. But he called me a spinster, wasn't even related. He didn't even know whether or not I was single or married or whatever. He's just a douchebag. But just to say that I'm the walking cliche. And what I mean by that is I am 40 and single with 3 baby kitties. I hear a lot of people talking about how they feel that pressure in their 30s, and I get it, because not just the stigma, but also you have this pressure feeling like you need to get your family in order, you need to get your shit together so that you can have a family, that kind of thing. And you know, we're told that the closer you get to 40, the more likely you're not going to have a kid. And I understand that pressure, but I also, maybe this is a sidebar, but I disagree with that whole once you hit 40, blah, 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 blah. First of all, there are a multitude of fertility doctors that have said that that's a load and that you can get pregnant much older than that. So there's that aspect, the fact that professionals are telling you that that's not true and that have proved it repeatedly with their clients. Like I said, that's a sidebar, but just to say that some of the things, if not all of the things that you might be worried about being single, are probably an illusion. In 2015, 2016, whatever it was, when I was dating that guy that was that catalyst for my self-love journey, essentially, I remember one day that I was doing my whole annual goals thing and like planning my life, and I sat there with a paper and I tried to contemplate where I wanted my life to go over the next however many years. And at the time I was 33 or something like that. So I was feeling that pressure of the stigma of, well, I'm this age and I'm dating someone, and therefore I guess I need to plan to have, the house and the family and the white picket fence kind of thing, because then this year and then the next year and then the next year, and you're thinking like, how long, like even if you're gonna have a kid, you still have to be pregnant for almost a year, and like in order to prepare for that, like just going backwards, like, well, if you want to buy a house, you need a down payment and blah 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 blah, all these things that take time. And so when you're looking at your plan, it's like it takes years to get to this outcome that you want. So just knowing how long it takes to get there also adds all this pressure. The thing is, I was dating someone that I didn't even really like. I knew I didn't love him, and I didn't understand. I didn't even understand why I was with him. And this wasn't like a super long relationship. It was just a catalyst moment. So that's why I talk about it. It was a moment that like woke me up. But I think much of that was because of the fact that I am single a lot in life. Like, I'm usually single, and that used to bother me a lot, and we'll get into that in a second. Hopefully I remember to talk about that. But that in itself added this extra pressure to the fact that I was dating this guy, and I'm like, well, is this normal? And I've talked about this as well. I was in an abusive relationship, and I was like, is this normal? Because I didn't really know anything different. I hadn't been in a healthy relationship, and my parents were abusive, and all of my friends and everyone that I knew, the good majority of them, were in some form of a toxic relationship. So I'm like, is this normal? Plus the media, you watch these storylines in movies and shows where they're extremely toxic, and you get this it like normalizes toxicity, normalizes abuse, where you hear people describing love, and what they're actually describing is like a trauma bond or something terrible. And you're like, oh, I guess that's love. I guess love is when you're just like really extreme and you do all these crazy things to each other because you just love each other so much. No, that's not what love is. That's not what love is. But that's what we learn in society, and that's why what's going on now in the world is so incredibly important. That's why our generation, like my generation, I guess is called a Zennial or whatever. I'm like on the cusp of Gen X and Millennial, and all the future generations and whomever from the older generations also feels like they're part of this movement to, awaken people and do their healing instead of just coping with life or going through the motions and doing the whole going after the American dream, because now we're like, maybe that was actually a wet dream, because it's not true. It's not. And none of these things that we're chasing actually make us feel happy or fulfilled. And we don't want to live with those same regrets. We don't want to repeat the same mistakes that our parents and grandparents made, or whomever. And so we're trying to figure out really what's important to us. What's really important to us, as opposed to what we're told is supposed to be important to us. And we're doing the healing, we're healing ourselves, and we're no longer tolerating toxicity in our lives. We no longer we're growing into, as a society, meaning you might not be there yet in your personal experience, but you'll probably get there. I'm essentially there, where you have reassessed what is important to you, and you recognize that you're no longer willing to put up with toxicity just to make other people happy, or to not be alone, or whatever it is. You realize that you can be much happier single on Christmas, or even alone on Christmas, than in a toxic relationship. So being single isn't the problem. It's just that we often feel like it is, because either we feel that social pressure, the stigma, or we don't want to be alone, or we're nostalgic, or we're picturing the life that we want to have, that we wish that we had, and it's just emphasizing how much we don't have it. And that's where the pain comes from. But being single isn't actually a problem. It's not even a bad thing. A bad thing would be being in a relationship that was hurting you, or that was stressing you out. Or, I guess we can all be stressed in a healthy relationship at certain times, but you shouldn't be stressed all the time. You shouldn't be walking on eggshells. You shouldn't be making yourself small because you're trying to appease someone else constantly and make them happy or make sure that they don't get triggered or whatever it is. Or, you let someone walk all over your boundaries, or you overgive, you bend over backwards for someone who's not reciprocating, that kind of thing. All these painful existences of being in some sort of a toxic relationship just because you don't want to be alone, especially on the holidays. And, it's not a bad thing to experience these things either, because they help us grow. They help us get a perspective on who we are and what we want. And if you hear a crash in a second, it's because my cat is on a table that's not really meant for being on. So when I used to be hurt by the fact that I was single on Christmas, my main reasoning for that pain was because it was constantly reminding me of what I wish I had in my life and what I didn't feel like I was able to get closer to. When I grew up, I had these big Christmases. Like, I had a big family. Growing up. Lots of aunts and uncles, cousins, whatever. It was very typical, loud Italian family with, talking at very high decibels and lots of food, several courses. And I used to, even as a kid, I used to think about how when I grow up, I can't wait to be like the hostess of these kinds of parties, because I wanted to I enjoyed decorating and cooking and planning all this stuff. I wanted to host these parties. So I just couldn't wait for the day when I grew up and I had my house and I could do it for other people. And that day never came. And it's bittersweet. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to come eventually in the future or some form of it, but it's a bittersweet loss, because as I got older, my family got smaller for several reasons. My grandmother, who had been hosting them, died. And it's almost as if as the older generation started to die off, the rest of the family started to fall apart. But it fell apart for the right reasons, because the truth started to come out about how extremely toxic people were. And other people started to heal and grow and have boundaries, or they would just get screwed over, and then the person who screwed them over would either no longer be welcome or they would just run away. So anyways, as time went on, the family essentially got smaller and smaller. And so now we have a small gathering of mostly emotionally and psychologically healthy people, instead of the loud toxic soup that it used to be when I was a kid, that I didn't understand the bigger picture of what was going on. I didn't understand these adult, narcissistic, passive-aggressive competitions and arguments that were going on, that I didn't understand. And now we have peaceful, more or less, peaceful gatherings that are just smaller. And sometimes the most peaceful gathering is a party of one, and that's okay too. And that doesn't mean that it has to be always. Some people, I know some people, because I read your comments, some people are just like, I prefer it this way. I want to be alone for the rest of my eternity. But that's not necessarily, sometimes I'm going to give it to you that maybe that's true, but sometimes that's also just trauma, because you've been through so much that you're just like, listen, I'm not doing this again. I'm not doing people again. People can be there and I'm going to be here with no people, and this is better. And I get that. But that doesn't mean that that's the best or only possibility, because I do believe that healthy people, the people are growing and, doing their self-work, and who take accountability, who have empathy for others. None of us are perfect. We're all still working on ourselves, but at least we're trying. We're going through that process. the most important parts is having empathy and taking accountability. And if you have people like that, then you can have a much better time. I'm saying that I feel like we are now finding each other. And family doesn't have to be blood. Family can be chosen people. And I think that a lot of people are choosing that now, is that after we've had to get rid of or escape terrible blood family, that now we're just like, okay, you know what? I'm going to find other people who have dealt with this, or other people that I prefer to be around, and I'm going to choose them, and they're going to be my family. So I feel like this is the future that we're coming into, that people are connecting to each other, whether or not we are, related or not. I feel like the future is very positive in terms of growing communities of like-minded people, and that is going to be a big part of changing the future, changing and healing the world. So if you're single on the holidays, I would ask you why, if it bothers you, let's say, because some of you it doesn't bother you, like it doesn't bother me. If it does bother you, I would ask you to ask yourself, why? Is it because you feel like you have to be with someone? Is it because it reminds you of the life that you don't have? Because you might not have it now, but you might have it later, or you might not have it because it's just better off this way, and the picture of the life that you thought that you wanted might not actually be what you want, and you just don't necessarily realize it, like in the sense of having my family, of having that giant big family and coming over and me being the hostess for it. I thought that's what I wanted. I thought that I wanted all these people with me, but then as I got older, I recognized as how much better it was that they weren't, and how much better it was that I was better that I'm alone, completely alone on Christmas, than with these people, because they are terrible. Is it because you are afraid of being alone, or being alone makes you uncomfortable, or being single makes you uncomfortable? What is it? What is it you're really feeling, and why are you feeling that? And then explore that. And as you explore that and you get to a deeper understanding of yourself and your own motivations for things, that's how you heal yourself. That's how you get to the root of things, and you figure out your core beliefs and your values and your trauma, and then you heal those things, and then you no longer need certain things that you needed before. I used to really, really, really hurt over being single, because I felt there was a variety of things, because I felt like it was unreachable for me. It was like the thing that I always wanted in my life was love, and it was incredibly unreachable for me, and I didn't understand why that was. I always felt alone. Why? Because I grew up in a family that neglected me. So of course I felt alone, because I was always alone. Whether I was in a room with other people or not, I was emotionally alone. When that's all you know growing up is neglect, and you grow up surrounded by people, but you still feel bad and you don't know why. Is it maybe because they don't treat you like you exist, or they treat you like you exist but you're always wrong, or you're always the problem, or there's always something to be ashamed of, or whatever it is? That's not how it's supposed to be. Your family is supposed to validate your existence. They're supposed to look at you, make eye contact, talk to you like a normal person, ask you how your day was, ask you how you feel, and then not make you feel bad about your answers. It was that neglect, that trauma from neglect, that made me so desperate for connection, and I couldn't get that connection because I didn't know how, because I was toxic, because that's all I knew, and I was attracted to toxicity because that's all I knew. And I had to heal that to get to the point where I am comfortable and happy being on my own. It is so much better to be happy being alone because you've healed than being with people who make you feel like you're alone. Being in a relationship is not the solution to loneliness. Say hello. Say hello. Okay, no, she don't want to. When you're alone, you have a baseline where you are not being abused or manipulated, so you can get some clarity. You learn what it feels like to have the freedom to make decisions and form opinions autonomously. Not only does that help you discover more of who you are, but helps you develop self-confidence, independence, and personal responsibility. You'll get clarity on how you think and how you make decisions when there are no outside influences, which make it harder for you to be manipulated or influenced in the future and give you a stronger ability to spot red flags from narcissists and other toxic people before they have the chance to infiltrate your life. That was from my book, Unconditional Self-Love. It's a chapter called How to Be Alone Without Being Lonely.